Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for sharing some of your Tuesday evening with me. My name's Melissa, and I am one of the MCAT tutors as part of the med school tutors team. And tonight I'm going to be talking to you all a little bit about MCAT summer prep. So right now I am calling in from Rye Beach, New Hampshire. I'm just enjoying a little bit of free summertime before I start medical school at the University of Virginia next month. So gearing up for that, I'm very excited. I finished my undergrad at Duke University in May of 2019, and then spent about 2 years living in New York City, where I worked at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center for a colorectal surgeon there, and also joined the MST team, and I've been MCAT tutoring, which has also been wonderful. So while I give everybody a few minutes to join here, I am going to just tell you a little bit about MST. So at Med School Tutors, we're a team of pre-med students, med students, residents, and attendings who have all been through the process you're either starting, considering, or maybe in the midst of. For me personally, as you know, I'm starting med school, so I have taken the MCAT, and I am now here to really support students through that process. I've been personally tutoring for a while, years before I started MCAT tutoring, so I've loved it for years now, and it was just natural for me to really want to be a part of this process for more students. We provide one-on-one online tutoring, really great support to students, very tailored approach, which I really enjoyed being a part of this team and contributing to. And we've been around for over 15 years now, so we have a long history of success, some really great methods that we share with students, and we really have it down to a science at this point. So like I said, I've loved being a part of MST, and I've loved getting the chance to support students through their MCAT journey, because I know it can be a pretty challenging one. So for today, what I plan to discuss with you all is some pros and cons of studying for the MCAT over the summer. Choosing when to study for the MCAT can be pretty difficult, and it is a fairly important decision. So I'm going to walk through some of the pros and cons of choosing to study over the summer. And these factors you can apply to really whenever you choose to study, but these are just some factors to especially consider if you're planning on dedicating a summer to studying. I also have 4 success factors that I feel are particularly important to consider and implement for effective MCAT preparation. So I'll walk through those with you, and again, highlight some of the features that I think are particularly relevant to summer studying. And then I will also give you some tips and tricks that I've developed along my own process and now as a tutor for creating a summer study schedule, which I think is incredibly important for setting you on the right track in your MCAT preparation. And then finally, we'll have a little Q&A, so you can ask me any questions that may pop up throughout our time together this evening. All right. So, pros and cons of studying for the MCAT over the summer. So first of all, probably the primary reason that most students choose to study for the MCAT over the summer is that you have some extra free time. You don't have classes typically, or at least not as many, and you have a lot of free hours that you can dedicate to studying for the MCAT. As many of you probably know by now, the MCAT is a really time-intensive preparation process. So regardless of where you start and who you are, it's going to take time and a lot of dedicated studying just to review all of the content that's covered on the MCAT and get yourself well acquainted with the test and develop some testing strategies. So having a lot of free time is really advantageous for this process in particular. The MCAT is probably unlike any test you've ever taken. It's really comprehensive, covers a lot of information. So as you look ahead to your studying process, you really need to consider all the time that you will have to dedicate from getting you from day one of preparation to test day. So extra free time, huge plus. Another advantage is there tends to be fewer distractions and competing interests during the summer. So not having classes, not having any clubs or other extracurricular involvements that may be more ramped up during the academic year. And then also maybe have a few less people around, which can be a bummer at times, but does help typically when you need to just focus and put in some hours grinding on the MCAT. Another thing that I really like about choosing to study over the summer is that you're forced into a bit of a defined study period. So this prevents the problem of pushing out, procrastinating, delaying when you actually get started on your MCAT prep, and it gives you a fixed schedule to work with. Now, things happen, and even the most well-planned study schedule can be interrupted by some unforeseen circumstance. So I am a huge proponent of not panicking if things come up and you end up needing to push your test date. However, I feel like having the defined period of summer break between an academic year or following an academic year really forces you to go ahead and get started with your prep as soon as possible and plan out your time during that defined period. And finally, the final advantage to choosing to prep over the summer is that you have a lot more flexibility in your schedule typically. So this means you can choose when to study during the day. And this, to me, is of particular importance as you prepare to take the test at the designated testing time that you've registered for. So throughout your study period, it's my opinion that it's never really too early to start preparing to be focused and engaged during whatever time of day that you'll be taking the MCAT. So schedule flexibility allows you to plan your study period during those hours as well, so that you just get in a rhythm of performing and being really focused during that time of day. Now, there are just a couple of cons to consider as well with summer studying. First of all, if you're coming out of an academic year, you're most likely not going to be too excited about the idea of jumping into MCAT studying following your spring finals. And I do not blame you. Post-semester fatigue is real and is definitely a challenge that I would say most to all students face if they plan on getting right into MCAT studying following a semester. So my advice there is, if you are planning on studying over the summer, just be prepared for it. Anticipate that it's going to be a little bit hard to get started after you've just given your all to finals, and maybe work in, a little bit of a break. If you can sort of take a vacation or do some fun activities after your semester so that you can relax and recharge in preparation for your summer studying. And finally, this con is also on the pro list, but schedule flexibility can pose a few challenges. So while it's really nice that more flexibility allows you to arrange your study time each day and each week, it also can allow for maybe more downtime or a little more procrastinating and less structure. So Schedule flexibility is a challenge that students who study over the summer might encounter more than students studying during the academic year or while they're working. Because in the latter case, obviously you have classes and work that structure your day. So your study periods are really defined for you. So if you're planning on studying over the summer, that's just one thing to be especially aware of. Okay, so my 4 success factors for you are structure, consistency, accountability, and recharge. These are applicable to MCAT prep regardless, but again, I'm going to give you some more information about specifically what to do if you're planning on studying over the summer, and how to implement these success factors. All right. So firstly, structure. As I've mentioned, it's really important to create a detailed study schedule at the outset of your preparation. This should be step 1 as you embark on your MCAT prep journey. Really need to sit down and create a day-by-day, week-by-week plan to get you from day 1 to test day. And I'm going to go into some more information, like I said at the beginning. After we get through these success factors, I'll tell you more about what you need to do to create that schedule and what you need to keep in mind. But you definitely need to make it for yourself, especially to provide that extra structure that you don't get if you're studying over the summer. And secondly, setting a dedicated daily study time is also really important. And again, this just provides structure and allows the dedicated periods for focusing and getting your body used to being alert and focused at a particular time of day. Routine when it comes to studying is super helpful. So even when you're creating that schedule, setting aside what tasks you're going to complete at what times of day. It might sound like you're overdoing it. You're not. Planning to that level of detail will really help you throughout the MCAT preparation process. So setting aside that dedicated daily study time is really important. And then finally, finding a quiet, reliable study space is critical. You really want to be studying in an environment in which you can focus, and try to mimic your test day environment. So finding somewhere that you will be able to focus and get your work done each day is really important. You don't want to have to deal with any extra variables in your MCAT prep. So if you were studying in a coffee shop, it might be really quiet on one day and then super noisy the next, or even vary throughout different times of day. And you just don't want that as an additional factor interrupting your preparation. We don't need any outside challenges here. We want to make it as clear and easy on ourselves as possible. So finding somewhere that you can study all summer is really important. Okay, so the next success factor that I want to talk to you all about is consistency. So once you've made that day 1 to test day study plan for yourself, you know what you need to do each day to get to that final goal, you need to make a daily commitment. And this is really where the work comes in. This is the marathon of MCAT studying, is the daily commitment you make to accomplishing whatever goals you set aside for yourself for that day. And I think that creating that schedule, creating that structure, and then being consistent in your preparation, they go hand in hand. And once you've created and outlined a plan for yourself, All you have to do is wake up each day, look at what you've already assigned yourself for the day, and then follow through. Um, this is much easier said than done. This is hard work. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that it's easy, especially during the summer when it's beautiful outside, or longer days, and you don't want to be sitting in a library or your bedroom, wherever you are studying. You need to make that commitment to yourself each day and follow through with the plan that you've made. So I can't stress the importance of that enough. Being consistent in your studying is so important. And in addition to just being consistent with your studying, you also want to establish habits that will help you through this process and will fuel your energy and focus. So that's sleep habits. If you like to exercise, then working in time each day for that. Even, something that I didn't anticipate thinking about, but ended up considering a good amount when I was taking the test, was finding the right snacks and food that fills me with energy while I'm studying. Especially as I geared up for test day, I really gave some thought to what's going to give me energy and sustain me and help me just fully focus and give my all to this test, and not, tire me out or something like that. So considering early on all of these little tweaks you can make to your daily habits will help with your just overall endurance throughout this process. When I talk about these things, I feel like I'm making it sound like it's a full body sport, but like in some ways it kind of is. It's hard. It's a lot of energy and focus that you have to dedicate to this preparation, and you have to sit for a lot of hours too, just like focusing on these practice problems. So anything that you can do to gear yourself up for it and put yourself in the best position to perform throughout your study period is so helpful. Okay, so next we're going to talk about accountability. So accountability is really hard with MCAT prep because you are pretty much in it alone. For me personally, there was no process that I had ever navigated independently to this extent prior to MCAT studying. And I feel that's the case for most people. With regular classes, you have classmates who are doing your work with you, or showing up to class every day with you. You have your teacher who is monitoring your progress. You have homework and quizzes and then tests that all sort of keep you accountable, keep you on track as you work through a course. And you don't have that set for you with the MCAT. You just have one test day at the end of your long preparation period. So you have to sort of create that environment for yourself, that class-like environment. So set goals for yourself throughout your study period and create some checkpoints. For me, I would have little daily goals that I liked to make for myself, and even weekly goals. And then I always had practice tests as my checkpoints so that I could make sure I was really staying accountable for the information that I was reviewing and progressing according to the rate that I needed to in order to achieve my goal score. Another tip is to loop in your support network. So whether that be family, friends, tell people about your prep process, and especially if you have a practice test coming up, like tell a couple people. First of all, anytime you speak it to somebody else, I feel like it adds just a little layer of accountability pressure on you to actually commit and follow through. When you're the only one, like when you're only accountable to yourself, then it's a little bit easier to let things slide. So I feel like, once you tell someone, it's like, okay, now I've got to follow through. I have to take the test, got to do it. And then also another added benefit is if you live with people, they'll probably be more conscious of the fact that you're taking a hard test that day, and maybe you keep it down and be extra mindful. And it's just nice to have people knowing that you're taking on this challenge. So I think that keeping your support network informed throughout your prep process is really beneficial for a lot of reasons. And then finally, you do have to keep yourself accountable for eliminating distractions while you're studying. At the beginning of my MCAT prep, and I recommend this to my students as well, you should just disable pop-up notifications from messages and other apps that aren't absolutely necessary, so that when you are studying on your computer, you don't have anything that's interrupting that workflow. Same thing goes for keeping your phone, turned over or on the other side of the room. Just anything you can do to make your studying more focused and eliminate any tempting distractions. One thing that I found out pretty early on with my MCAT prep is that even if I'm not spending a lot of time on checking on my phone, like checking messages or checking a social media app, the act of just checking my phone or checking another app or pulling up a different website gives my brain this refresh button. And you don't get that when you're taking the MCAT. So I quickly realized that I had become a little bit dependent on those little mental refreshes, and I needed to cut it off so that I could learn to really endure a long period of time just focused on the content and practice questions or reviewing. So as early as you can, eliminate those distractions and just get yourself really in the habit of focusing for the allotted, test period of time. Okay. Oh, and another thing with accountability, this I just want to mention, this is really where having a tutor can help a lot. Helps with all of this, well, it helps with the previous two success factors as well, but definitely having someone who is with you in the process and monitoring your progress, making sure that you're staying on schedule, is really helpful, because you kind of have a partner through it all, which is great. Okay, so the last success factor is recharge, and it is equally important as all the others. You cannot sustain this whole study period without breaks and doing restorative activities that are going to help you, the next day focus on MCAT material again. So at the outset, when you're considering your whole study period and making your daily schedule and factoring in how much time you can devote to studying each day, really prioritize those restorative activities as well, especially during the summer. Again, like I said earlier, you get nice weather, long days, take breaks to enjoy that sunshine, and get outside and just give yourself chances to rest as well amidst all of it. Again, it's a long process. It's a bit of a marathon. So you need to think about what breaks you can give your mind and your body as a necessary complement to your studying. And finally, make some time to socialize. Especially, so, a lot of people who choose to pursue medicine are people. I am definitely one. I need to have social interaction and be around people. So studying for the MCAT and being alone for hours on end feels really isolating and can definitely hurt motivation and morale a little bit. So even if you don't have friends around necessarily, make time to give a friend a call on a study break, or make plans to see people when you're done studying at the end of the day, just so that you can get that human connection and little social interaction to, again, energize you and help you recharge for the next day. All right, so have a couple pointers for creating a study schedule. This is something that med school, all tutors at MST provide for students. I think it's incredibly valuable. So it's something that I wish I had when I was going through the process myself. I sort of had to like figure it out along the way, and definitely wasn't as efficient as I could have been had I had a tutor helping me from the very beginning and creating that schedule for me. So I'm glad that I get to do that for students now, because I think there's great benefit in it. So the first step when you're creating a study schedule is taking stock of all study materials you have, and then really just distributing them throughout the entire prep period. So you want to make sure that you have evenly spaced out your prep materials and you're working through the material at a pace that makes sense for you and will get you to where you need to be on test day. This eliminates I felt like it's easy throughout the prep process, if you don't do this, to have like a seemingly endless pile of materials like hanging over your head and not really knowing how to utilize them. Doing this ahead of time when you create your study schedule and really going through all your materials and making sure that you're using them throughout your study time will eliminate that problem. So this is really, really critical. And then when it comes to crafting your daily and weekly schedule, you want to try and incorporate subject matter variety throughout. So this will just keep you rotating through all sections of the test on a very regular basis, so that you're not studying entirely one subject and then switching gears to another, and maybe like losing touch of the section you've done first by the time you get back to it. So incorporating that variety daily, that's what you're going to have to do on test day. So that's what you want to create in your study schedule as well. Another key point to factor in when you're making your schedule is to make time for problem solving, so that you can be practicing your testing skills, getting really acquainted with how these questions are asked and how to solve them, and then also exercising active recall. This sort of ties into accountability as well. When you have practice problems, you have something that's checking you each day, checking your progress, and holding you accountable a bit for that material. So you want to incorporate that into your daily schedule. Even if you're early on in your prep, you want to just be doing practice problems so that you can get in the groove of doing so. And like I've mentioned, talked about it on the last slide, I've mentioned it a couple times, but you really want to factor in rest days and your necessary time off. So if you have a family vacation scheduled for the summer, you want to make sure you factor that into your study time from the outset. You don't want to all of a sudden get to that week, try and study, and then like throw yourself off. You want to make sure that you've really accounted for the days that you're not going to be available to study from the beginning, so that you don't run into problems and delays later on. And that stuff is fun and, again, necessary as well. Like, you don't need to cancel every fun thing you had planned for the summer, but you do need to consider that those days aren't going to be devoted to MCAT studying, so that time is going to have to come from elsewhere. And finally, set realistic expectations for yourself. This is a daunting process for a lot of people, and it can feel like there's limitless information that you need to cover when you're sort of at the very beginning of the prep process. But be patient with yourself, set realistic expectations so that you can maintain those daily, weekly goals If you set unrealistic expectations at the beginning, then you'll quickly sort of fall off the schedule and it'll be much harder to stay motivated and consistent. And this is something that I think could take a little bit of tweaking at the beginning. So make your initial study schedule and keep in mind that within the first week, you might realize that you need to make some adjustments. So do so, and then, change your schedule accordingly. But those are really the key points to consider when creating a study schedule. If you factor all of these things in, you should be able to create a really strong schedule for yourself and really start your MCAT prep on the right foot. Okay, so we are going to head into the Q&A in just a few minutes. So before we do so, I'll just reiterate some key points about MST. Again, we provide one-on-one tutoring sessions, like I said, and talked about a little more on the last slide. We create custom study schedules for you. So we basically take that last slide off your plate. We've done it lots at this point and have a good sense for the process. So we create that all for you, and then you just have to follow it with our support. We really cater to your needs. So again, we've been through this process ourselves. I'd like to say, pretty good at identifying students' weaknesses and strengths, and then really tailoring sessions to those weaknesses so that we can bolster them and help you improve and achieve, the highest level of success that you can and really your fullest potential. So if you have any questions about getting started with tutoring, you can direct them to the contact information below, and I will take any questions. You can just pop them in the chat. First question here, I scored 497 on the Kaplan diagnostic test yesterday. My test exactly 1 month. What would be the most effective way to study? So as you're nearing your test day, it becomes critically important that you really analyze and review the tests that you've taken to identify the problem areas that are arising. So at this point, I think that in the final few weeks, what I recommend for all of my students is to really look into the practice problems they've done, the practice tests they've done, and see what questions they're missing, and then use those as a guide for what content you need to brush up on. So that will be the most efficient way to target your weaker areas without wasting time going back to textbooks and reading through whole chapters that might have information that you either already know or isn't quite as critical. So my recommendation would be to go through that test and really take your time looking at the missed questions and making sure that you feel solid about that material. Okay, is there a specific order you suggest when studying different subjects? For example, how should I decide what subjects to study on what day? So there isn't a specific order that I recommend. I just recommend incorporating variety no matter what you do. Obviously, you're going to take the test in a specific order on test day. You know the order that the sections are coming in. So in that sense, if you prefer to study Chem Phys and then Cars and then Biochem and Psych Soc, that's fine. But really, throughout the study period, it's important to incorporate that variety so that you get used to pulling from different areas, pulling content from different areas of your brain and memory on a regular basis. So we have a question here about the daily, how much time each day should be dedicated to MCAT preparation. That really depends on the study period and the time that you have available. So it's difficult to say exactly. There's no perfect number. It really just depends on where you are in your prep, if you've taken the classes recently, like your core pre-med classes recently, or if you're going to need to really review and do a deep dive of the MCAT prep books first to review that information before you get into more practice problems. So that's going to vary per student. It's just a matter of the available time that you've set to study for yourself before test day. Okay, so the 4 sections of the MCAT are: first, Chem Phys; second, you have a critical analysis and reasoning skills. It's a reading comprehension section. Then a biology and biochemistry section, and then a psychology and sociology section last. So it's 4 sections, and the goal is really to cover all of your core pre-med courses. So it's a pretty comprehensive exam in that way. Okay, so yeah, let me just clarify one thing. You don't have to be a pre-med major per se, but before you apply to medical school, there are course requirements that you have to take. And so tutors can definitely help students who are from any major, but you will have had to take those prerequisites, and those are a pretty critical foundation for medical school and before you begin your MCAT prep. Okay, so should I start content review with subjects I am more familiar with or the ones I am weaker in? That's a good question. I would recommend I'd recommend definitely targeting your weaker areas. That question sort of comes in at the very beginning when you start to make your study schedule. For me personally, I liked to review subjects that I was more comfortable with. So I would, read through a chapter, but spend more time on the weaker areas. So that'll come into play when you're allotting time for certain chapters throughout your study schedule. You don't necessarily have to give yourself quite as much time for a subject that you're really familiar with. In my opinion, if you have the time, a quick review can never hurt, and just makes sure that the information's fresh in your mind. But definitely take into account the subjects that you're going to need to spend a little bit more time in when you're making that schedule, because there certainly will be some chapters that take much longer than others, and that does depend on the density of the content and how familiar you are with it. So I think that's a really great thing to be aware of early on as you're creating your schedule. So for MCAT materials, I really like the Kaplan books personally. Exam crackers are also great. All the prep books are obviously suited for this test. They're made for this test, so they'll include the content required. However, I'm personally partial to Kaplan. That's my favorite if I have to pick one. Okay, how would you recommend studying for a subject that you have not had previous exposure to? What study material would you use? Yeah, so in this case, I would recommend using one of the MCAT prep books. You can buy an MCAT prep pack with books on all the subjects covered, and then I would use those books as a guide for that specific material. If I say this to all of my students, but if, for some reason, certain aspects of the chapter aren't making a lot of sense, there's so many resources online as well to supplement your studying. I really liked watching videos. There's so many YouTube videos that you can use that just present the information in a slightly different way. So I would recommend definitely using the books as your starting point, your basis. They have great explanations. They're very thorough. And then you can always supplement with online videos and stuff like that. Okay, so if you're taking the MCAT in the spring of 2022, should I use the 2022-2023 materials or the 21-22 materials? Okay, so what I would recommend is doing a search online just to see if there were any meaningful changes made to those editions. Typically, it's very minor edits made to the new material, so that should not make a meaningful difference. If you already have the 2021-2022 books, I would recommend just using those. Like, there's no need to go buy an entirely new set for minor edits. But I would do, honestly, a quick Google search just to make sure that there isn't like anything big that you get with the new version that you wouldn't get with the older version, just to verify that. Okay, so if there aren't any more questions, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up for tonight. Thank you all so much for joining me, sharing a little bit of your Tuesday evening. I really appreciate it. I've had a great time just talking about some MCAT summer prep with you all. And again, if you have any questions whatsoever, write this contact info that's on the screen now down below, and you can get in touch with our amazing team. All right, have a great night, everybody. Enjoy.